The Immortal Mask, a 1970s superhero crime noir adventure that follows a retired soldier who is given a covenant interview with a death row inmate. What he learns from the interview thrusts him into Atlanta's shadowy underworld. He'll have to utilize his military training to survive from being hunted for the information that could topple the most powerful ruling class in the city. This is not a pre-order or a crowdfunding campaign. Get your books now at TheBaronEarlsShow.com.
Seconds to curtain, folks.
I don't care if Monday's black, Tuesday, Wednesday, hard to tell.
Hey.
Thursday, never looking back. It's
You guys hear me?
unloved.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? We're good? That's good. I can hear you guys. I want to make sure we can hear each other. Hello.
We can hear you. We could not talk while the video was playing. Our mics were muted.
Whoa.
I can hear him. Yeah. How y'all doing?
Good.
Like that new intro you got for Critical Blast.
That's going to expand. I've already got logos that have to be added to it.
Good for you.
That was an amazing intro. I love that intro. I thought that was super cool.
Thank you. I have fun making the intro videos or paying other people to do them. It's another LCS Guys show tonight, and I can emphasize the Z on the end of guy now because for so long we've had people falling away and just getting busy with stuff. But Pops Van Zant said, "Go get Fergel. Go get Fergel. He's gonna be on there, man." And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Go watch Laurie's channel. She just had him on." And I was like, "Oh, this guy's an energy fireball here. Let's see if he'll grace our show." So
Nice to meet you, Fergel.
Nice to meet you both as well. Thank you for having me on.
So introduce yourself a little deeper here about you and your comic store and how long you've been there and where you're at, where people can find you.
Well, we are actually in my comic store. We're in Gotham Knight Comics. We're located at 5 Mile in Newburgh in Livonia. Now, again, I say that tongue-in-cheek because in the next 5 years, we'll have 30 locations and we'll be one of the largest comic store chains in the country. That's all in the future. That's all our future plans. But a little bit about myself. I've been in business. So I was a banker. I come from the finance world. I was in financial advising and banking for almost 30 years. I was like 23 years, actually. I apologize. I feel like I'm aging myself. I got a Samuel Jackson kind of look going on. That's why he's like 136 years old. So I've got that kind of situation going on. But during the pandemic, as I mentioned when I was talking to Pops, I'd gotten my dream job in banking and thought I was exactly where I wanted to be and realized that life is too short and I'm just tired of working for people that don't really care. And I needed to follow passion because I felt like the world needed to, comics are such a great uniter. It doesn't matter where you lean politically. It doesn't matter where you lean in life. Comics and heroes are amazing. And I just wanted to deliver that.
You've never been on Twitter, have you?
Or any social media. Yeah.
I have been on social media. I've been on those channels. Although Twitter, I've only sent one tweet in my life, and so I say I'm not a tweeter, but I know what a Twitter is, and I've been there. But
Stay away from it. It will kill that optimism. Okay, we can't have that. We need it.
It's the way I feel when I did this was this idea, and I've had it for 10 years as a banker. I just believe that the comic industry is one that is so fragmented, and so the experiences are so different from place to place, and oftentimes they're designed for people who already love it and know what they're looking for. And so what I wanted to do is create a very tailor-made experience that was designed to appeal to every level of collector, whether you're new, whether you're experienced, whether you've never done it before, been out of it for 10, 15 years. So we added some unique touches. I work with a lot of small vendors, made a lot of great relationships through Etsy and some single vendors and some unique opportunities that we offer. And then obviously what we do here is we take people through an experience. That's why my store looks uniquely different. We wanted to create a visually stunning experience, which is number one. And then we just wanted to create one that no matter what you did, you almost had a cheers for nerds. And for anyone that was, that was a parent or grandparent of a nerd or just anyone in that opportunity. And my goal, being the former banker that I am, my goal and what I noticed in the industry is that no one's ever actually taken and franchised or built a great model that could be transferable. Because if you do all the research on this, you'll find that most people get into this and they end up getting out of business and hating it. And I understand why. There's a lot of struggles to it. But if you think about where this industry is, it's a $7 billion a year industry. I mean, CGC just got bought by BlackRock Equity for $500 million. That was completed during the pandemic. So there's a huge marketplace. Just no one's been able to figure out the right theory and methodology to create a national brand, a chain. And that's what we've done. We're actually really proud. That's what we're creating through our experiment here in the last 7 months. We're the highest rated comic store in the state of Michigan. We're the only 5-star rated comic store in the state of Michigan. And that's beating everyone, right? That's beating all opportunities out there and people who've been around for a while. And really the goal being to build the brand first, build the opportunity, build the community, and then take this thing and show other people how to do it everywhere.
Well, let me offer you a piece of advice as somebody who operated multiple locations for nearly 40 years before I switched over to mail order during the pandemic. And I've seen a lot of people try to open chains. I've actually had chains come after me, declare, I've had local retailers all band together, organize, break Sherman's antitrust laws and, try to price rig. Everybody said, we're going to drive him out of business. I was still around. They were all gone. But you don't remember a chain called Hastings?
I do remember a chain called Hastings. Absolutely.
They all came after me. I mean, they were all around all my stores. And I had every Hastings manager in about 100-mile radius around my stores call me up, ask me, to come teach them how to retail comics. I actually had one retailer who was so outlandish. He says, hey, I was driving by your store the other day, saw a lot of cars out front, and I was thinking those cars should be in front of my store. So why don't you come on down and teach us how to retail? And I'm like, dude, are you an idiot, or do you think I'm an idiot, or is it both? I'm not going to take my customers away.
Well,
but,
that's important.
Well, what I was going to get to is, I had 2 stores in 2 cities, Little Rock and North Little Rock. Now, it sounds like the same city, but it's not. Separated by a river. RJ is familiar with this because he was in the area for a while. And people do not go from one side of the river to the other. It's like, hey, have you been to the dark side of the moon? Oh, I don't go to that side. It's just people don't cross that river. Little Rock has got its own audience. North Little Rock's got its own audience. And over the years, I'd watch as the trends would shift differently. So having 2 locations kind of gave me a great perspective on the comic industry because I realized how localized every single audience is. And so all the people who try to go with chains, well, they try to do like a regional buy or this and that. And it's one of those things you have to have a local buyer for every location because every location is different. You're not going to sell the same amount of Archies at every location, same amount of X-Men at every location. Every audience is going to have a completely different clientele, and that taste changes on a monthly basis.
100%.
You got to keep your roller skates on just to keep up with the changes. So
100%. So our model is a little bit different. We're less. I mean, that is so critically important, Michael. And I'm so glad you touched on that because no matter how global you are, it's be global, think local. It's always that's the business banker in me. Be global in your mentality, but think local in everything you do. But for me, it's always been about the experience, right? The Ray Kroc methodology was less about the burger as it was about the experience. We're more modeled in a sense like the Five Guys. Well, again, there's a different experience to every opportunity. At the end of the day, in order to help stores get successful, and I'm actually helping stores now because I just believe that this is about protecting a legacy that helped change my life. This is about protecting something that when I was a kid and I was struggling, comics brought me out of a dark part of my life, and they created something inside of me that is still burning strong at almost 50 years old. And the way I'm thinking is, the idea is create the experience, right? No matter where you go, the experience is really, it's timeless. It doesn't matter whether you're in Arkansas, whether you're in Florida. I've lived in 6 or 7 different states as a banker. I've traveled extensively. And what I found, whether I've lived in Georgia, Florida, or DC, or anywhere in those areas, is I found that no matter where you go, it's still always about the experience. And that experience is so critical to your growth, right? And that's what we're trying to devise. Now, the methodologies and the thought process, we're just at day one, right? We're just building this thing small and creating the proof of concept. But I've been approached even in this area by, and there's some great things we got going on. My goal is, in this area to have 4 to 5 stores within the next 2 to 3 years, right? And build those in zones where there really isn't comic stores. So we're going to be between. We're not going to try. My goal isn't trying to drive everyone out of business. That's not a methodology that's successful. And those that do that karmically suffer themselves. It doesn't matter whether you're Apple or it doesn't matter whether you're a small business. If you're going about business the wrong way, you will karmically suffer. You will end up cannibalizing yourself in the future. It's about finding those holes where there are a lot of great demographical markets and then building spots there and then allowing that brand to really dominate first, right? And that's where I think, and then the other piece of that is teaching other store owners how to do it. Because I'm a student of sales and because I've been in this market and taught sales teams for 20 plus years. And I've never been less than top 10% of any business I've ever been in, because I learned very quickly, because I was a commission only guy for a decade plus, I learned very quickly how to build relationships and market that could survive competition, that could survive people coming out there right behind you. And like I said, living in DC for 5 years taught me even more, right? It's a market where you're operating in, where every time you go to somebody, especially as a banker, and offer something, you got 15 other people behind you coming through the door to offer something else. So you've got to learn how to quantify in a market that is fully saturated. And I the comic market has been successful. I was lucky enough to work with clients like Steve Anderson of Third Eye Comics, right? He's been able to do this in the Mid-Atlantic. He's got 13 locations. He's been able to figure out regionally how to build this brand and create this market and create this opportunity, right? We want to do that. I'm audacious. We want to win an Eisner Award. We're going for the full Monty. We're trying to create something that I think doesn't exist successfully and beyond the regional atmosphere. And so that's right now, we're starting small, obviously in Michigan, the Midwest area, but my goal is to be able to build this thing across the country and create a brand that really, I think there's so much value in a stronger brand opportunity, because number one, it gives you better buying power. It finally puts you at the table with these distributors in a way that makes sense, because they are selling and they have no care about the retailer. The way they're operating right now, they're almost in opposition. It's not like you're just fighting the market. You're also fighting your suppliers. And your suppliers,
partner for sure.
and so really, at the end of the day, we've got to change that dynamic. The power should not be shifted to those supplying it, when really the reason why Marvel is successful as it is isn't the suppliers, it's the buyers. And there is a market to be made. I mean, I could make the financial demographics to say, listen, 1.5 billion for Endgame. Is there enough? Are we fatigued? No. Look at the pre-anticipation, the pre-sales on Quantumania. They're already breaking records. Even looking at DC, and I know they've got a lot to still learn, but they're still trying. They're putting so much money where their mouth is. There's an opportunity for both the independents, for the large providers, but somebody has to be strong enough to take these suppliers on. And at the end of the day, it's about legacy making for me. And I know it's audacious. I know I'm crazy, but that's the way it works out here in Detroit. We're crazy. We do things different, right?
The distributors will love you, though, because in the eyes of the distributor, you're the end customer. They don't care about me, the guy who's going to come into your store and buy a book. They care about how many books do you buy. They got their money. They're out of the game now.
See, that's the change. That's the changeover we need to make. That's the difference, because they're pushing out so many titles on a monthly basis, and most people have most comic store owners, especially if they're new in the business. You're looking at a list of 1,000 books. Where do I start? Where do I put? And that's how they drown themselves in books in 6 months, because they don't know what they're buying. We've been very fortunate, and I've been able to keep up with my trends, but not everybody has the background I have to understand the financial dynamics of this, and that's part of the problem. Is that we're taking this on every front. Like, I'm working with buddies right now on software that allows you to kind of accurately predict where to buy based on the fact that the models are currently existing, that you have to buy 2 months out for books that you don't know we're going to sell. We're trying to scrape data off the existing platforms, off the internet. Obviously not Twitter, because now they're charging for their data, but everyone else has free data. So we're pulling data. Again, my goal is to change this game and create a game that puts, for the first, and maybe this is unrealistic. At the end of the day, if we don't dream beyond our grasp, what are we living for, right? I'm not going to be surrounded by wishes I could have done or legacies I could have created. So we're just going to try to change this. I know it's audacious. I know a lot of people have tried this and failed, but I just believe that if we can change this model, we can get the attention of these suppliers and Marvel and DC and get them to start thinking about suppliers as partners instead of people, that the end user, and let's start thinking about the consumer, because it makes for better stories, it makes for better books, and it gives everybody a better experience in buying and selling.
Yeah, one thing that you said that I've always told people is, when they say, hey, I want to open up a store, I was like, find a niche that's not being served. That's where you're going to have your best chance. And of course, their reaction, well, we just want to take something away that somebody else has already established. And of course, so the first step they always do is price cutting. And, I've probably had 100 competitors try to openly go after me, declare I'm putting him out of business, and they're all gone.
Yes.
And, I didn't participate in the price cutting war because, hey, if you don't want to be able to pay your bills, that's your call. And yeah, sure enough, they go out real quick because, they're selling below what their operating cost is. And you can't do it. It's not sustainable. But now one thing you were saying about how you were kind of like data mining to try to figure out what sells, that's something I tried doing, but I backed away from that. And actually, I stopped even reading the comics because I found out that what looks good to you, or even what, people in the media say, hey, this is going to be a great book. That's the worst advice you can get, because like I was saying, how my market's different from one side of the river to the other is, what do your local customers want? And so I would wait until the last minute to look at that catalog. And I'd be like, wow, that looks like a great book. Wait a minute, I haven't had one person express an interest in that. Well, I better not order it. And sure enough, I didn't need to. And so you keeping your ear close to the ground, talking to your customers. That's the best data mining you can get.
Oh, 100%. I think for us, it's about not only that ear to that customer and that ground, but I do believe that the data mining piece is less about what sells and more about what's in conversation, right? I call it the invincible theory, or I call it the Rick Grimes theory. There's always, if you could go backward, data backward is always 100% predictable. So backward looking data is always the ability to see there were spikes and trends when certain things take off. And oftentimes, part of my market is figuring out how to, and because we sell in a different way in our store, we don't sell like every other store. We use some very complicated yet user-friendly sales techniques that really are built less around the product and more around the relationship. There's not a single customer who walks in my store that doesn't get a relationship first before we ever even look at a comic book. I want to know my customer before we get to that point. My staff is the same way.
You realize I just got off work 3 hours ago to enter this part of my world, and y'all are putting me back to it because I'm a data engineer for a data science division in a bank that does predictive modeling analysis on trends. I'm like, and he's talking all the work stuff. Go away.
Yeah.
No, that's just one piece of it. For me, it's also about loving it. I mean, again, I think that, there's so many different things that we do that other stores don't do. There's so many unique products that we have that other stores, again, even in my local area, there are a lot of larger comic stores that you walk into them. And oftentimes, again, when I would do my research, it was as simple as I visited every store in the state of Michigan, and I went to a bunch of them in Ohio, and I would go into every store with my wife, and I would put my little clock on. I would say, okay, how long does it take someone to introduce themselves to me? How long does it take till I get a recommendation? Does anyone ask? Let me walk around with some expensive books and see if someone will help me and guide me and teach me, and just look at those processes, those holes.
One of my rules to all my employees was like, greet people as soon as they come through the door. And that's also a good loss preventive technique, because you get the person who don't pay any attention to me, like, whoa, that's the guy you really got to watch.
Yes.
They want to be invisible. Well, they're up to something.
We're very lucky. We've only had, at this point, only one person that has done a loss conversion in our store, and it was a very small amount, thank God. And thankfully, we let folks know they're being recorded here, and we manage that process. It's because again, that's the small store environment, right? That's, for me, the small store environment is the best environment. About 1,500 square feet. Our model is uniquely different. Back here, we operate under the concept very similar to that grocery store, that operating. So what we do, it's similar in the sense that you can kind of walk into each of our bays, but we also put all of our unique items, instead of in the back, in the front. So that way we get the excitement, the hook gets them in the door, and the opportunity takes them to the back. So that's how we try to, we just do things differently here. It's a model I've been thinking about for over a decade, and I've tested this model 100 different ways and looked at this 100 different ways. And, thankfully I've been blessed enough, like I said, to work with some interesting individuals and get to know some folks. And because I don't come off as I'm trying to take your business, I don't do that. And that's one of the things that I don't like about this. I don't like that people try to cut their nose. I'm just now learning how many cutthroat dealers there are in my local area, and what they will do to make a sale at the expense of you. So that's been unique.
Burglarize my stores. I mean, and brag to my customers about it. Because hey, will you testify to the police? Like, all of a sudden they get amnesia. The first day I closed my stores was the first day I haven't had people actively trying to rob from me. I had 2 locations, 5,500 square foot. Security camera system. You would not believe how many shoplifters I would catch all the time. And it's the repeat offenders. And it's not a matter of, they can't afford it. They do it for a thrill. It's a kleptomaniac type of situation. And you're right about the cutthroat to your competitors. I mean, they'll bust out your window in the middle of the night, try to steal your hottest book. And, it just, it's awful. But now I will say another thing too. You're like me. I came from a corporate world. I was the purchaser for International Graphics. So I was writing $1 million purchase orders for paper orders by the rail car load. And so when I came in and started doing my comic stores, it was like I moved from the big games to playing with Tiddlywinks. But I brought professionalism into it, and I did a lot of things what you're trying to do. Made my stores unique. That's another key thing. Stand out for everybody by offering a selection that other people do not. But I will tell you, the one big danger going from the corporate world into being your own business boss, it's the worst boss you ever have. He never.
I'm definitely, thankfully, having been a banker for 20 years, the one thing is I've got enough data of how businesses operate and how they're successful and how they're not. And so the one thing I'm, right now I'm focused on, obviously I've still got to be both a general and a soldier. And it's because I'm training, right? I burned through at this point, probably 6 different employees, but I'm lucky enough that I've got 2 that are solid, really solid. They understand my system. They can work within my methodologies. They're able to do that. But there's so many challenges. And, my wife, I kind of look at my wife and my son sometimes and realize, I'm taking on a lot more. But for me, this is just legacy playing. I mean, I get excited about comics. I get excited about stories. I get excited when my customers come out and they can't wait to leave me 5-star reviews. And they just, when you go to my Google page and you read the reviews, it's not just 5 stars. It's what they say. It's the experience to a fault that comes through that process, and that's been something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, the most talked about the relationship building, and that's again one of the mottos that we have painted on one of our walls is that all things considered, people would rather do business with their friends. So you're going to have people who are not going to have Gotham Knights come out of their mouth when they want to go comic shopping, because when I lived in Little Rock, Michael had 2 stores. I couldn't tell you which one was which by name. There were 2 different names. I was like, is it first edition? Is it collector's corner? Is it the comic book store? No, because I just said, I'm going to go to Michael's and buy some comics. And you're going to have people say, I'm going to go see Fergel and buy some comics.
Actually, I had 2 or 3 of them today came from over an hour and a half away just to buy books from me. And they passed probably 3 stores on the way to me. The unique thing about the Midwest is, I don't know if you know this, there are more comic stores concentrated in the Midwest than almost anywhere else in the country. There are
Oh, yeah.
more
I came
stores.
from Belleville, Illinois. There's 4 of them there.
They're all focused. The publishers are focused on what the East Coast stores tell them, what the West Coast stores tell them, and then they look at the Midwestern values where we're like, look, we can't sell pornography to children. Oh, well, there's something wrong with your community. Like, no, there's nothing wrong with them. You just got to give us the tools we need to be able to make sure we don't sell the wrong thing to the wrong person. That's all we're asking. We're not saying you can't make it. Just don't put me in a situation where I possibly sell something that's not appropriate to the wrong audience, because they're like, well, then you're taking one for the team. We're getting free publicity. Like, no, I'm not going to jail and losing my livelihood, everything I built. So you get a little free bump like Band in Boston. That's just a way to do good business.
Yeah, and that's again, I'm not going to sound like a dead horse, but for me, this industry, if you look at Diamond, right, and look at what happened with Diamond, they lost their Marvel and DC, and obviously that put them back on their heels. Or the problem with a lot of these companies is that, again, they understand, right? This is an overall generality. This is almost a $7 billion industry, from movies to merch to everything that's out there. I mean, it's a massive industry, and what I've discovered is that fans, especially in the pandemic, they're everywhere. You put 2 years in jail, you're going to find a hobby. Doesn't matter what it is, you're going to find something. And people rediscovered hobbies and rediscovered books. That's why your mail order business is phenomenal, because there's a lot of people who want to order that stuff, and they're comfortable getting it from you. I think we understand our niche. We're innovative enough to use technology. Like, we've got iPads in our stores, so when people come in, like, I call it my super grandmas, my super moms, those who are buying for their kids but have no idea, we can help them with our iPads, help them find their information, find what they're looking for. We're just about, again, it sounds like a broken record. It's about taking power back that currently resides in the wrong places. And I firmly believe that if these other stores, the reason why they're cannibalizing each other is because these suppliers set it on a course towards gladiatorial combat in order to be a surviving comic store, and that is not the way to do business.
When the pandemic was first coming in, and all these West Coast stores were like, hey, just shut it all down, because they were getting quarantined, and they didn't want to do curbside service or mail orders. And so I had an article published on ICV2.com, which is a good source of industry news. I said, look, this is an opportunity. People are going to be quarantined at home. They're going to want something to read. This is the biggest opportunity we've had, since back before the days of radio and things like that and television. And then that same day, Steve Jeppe of Diamond Comics puts out an article going, well, I got a quarantine on my warehouse and all the branch, so we're shutting it all down. And bam, that's when they lost Marvel and DC. Marvel and DC stopped making comics for a while. And the industry gaming industry was exploding during the pandemic.
Yes.
Comic industry, we just got our teeth kicked in.
Yes.
And that's why I closed my 2 stores. I'm like, I figured it probably would take me $100,000 in losses to maintain my 5,500 square foot, all the fixtures, all the utilities, all the rent, through that dead period. And I was like, I'm not working my tailbone off until I'm 90 to try to recover from the losses I'll incur just to stay open the next couple of years. And so that's why I went to mail order, maintained my profitability, didn't find, because mail order was just booming. Now, in the recent recession, mail order, all sales have really kind of curtailed down. DC, it's like they're not even trying anymore.
They're not. I mean, it's interesting when you bring that up. I mean, other than the occasional good title like Lazarus or Batman, Batman in general, or Detective Comics. I mean, maybe Spider, Superman, some of the big titles. But I mean, you're right. DC, it feels like they're phoning it in, and quite frankly, in some of Marvel's books, they're phoning it in. I think what you're seeing now is a rise of really strong, artist-driven, creative, independent titles, and I think I'm excited to see where that goes. There's just some really cool independents. Like, I'm talking a lot about 8 Billion Genies. I love this book. This is a Michigan-based book, Michigan artists, Michigan stories, and it is one of the coolest books. Amazon bought this entire series on one book. And right now they're up to 5 printings. And I mean, this thing is just selling off the chain, and it's a cool story. What happens if everybody gets one genie and one wish? I mean, how cool is that? Right?
I'm subscribing to that. So yeah, it's doing well.
It's doing really well. And there are a lot of independent stories like that are waiting to be told. And that's part of the reason why I love Laurie so much, because we're bringing her books in our store, because the way she tells that Pale Rider story gets me. I'm not even a Western guy, but I love the way she presents that story. And I think my readers, those that come in, my customers will love it. And really, at the end of the day, again, for us, it's about building that market. We believe the power belongs with the people. We don't believe the power belongs with the suppliers. Right? Listen, Marvel and DC can keep churning out movies till they're blue in the face. That's going to keep us all busy. But at the end of the day, their comic shop needs to respect the store. Without the store, they already tried that direct to market and it almost bankrupted them back in the 90s. So without the store, they're gone. And that's half their revenue. Regardless of whatever they say, that's half their revenue. And if they don't have enough feeder material, those movies will stop. They will at some point stop. So right now has never been a better time for some activist owner, somebody crazy like myself, to get out here and do something that's never been done. I have the connections. That's part of what I came from, was middle market. So I know private equity. I know who to reach out to. I know who to talk to. Build a model, build a system, take it to market, win the Eisner Award, which is really critical for me, because to me, someone who loves this,
finalists for that, yeah.
That's it. There are less Eisner Award winners than there are Oscar winners, because the Eisner Award's only been around for 30 years. There's 88 years plus of Oscar winners, but only 30 Eisner Award winners. And quite frankly, that to me is, and again, I know how long it normally takes to win. I know we're audacious, but just changing the game, it's got to be done. And I know I feel like I'm probably speaking broken record, but I think the way the fans out here respond, the way the pre-sales go off the chain, the way markets are out there, there is a true market to change it. But until we stop, so I tell every comic store that owns it, stop trying to kill yourself by killing somebody else. Stop trying to hurt a competitor, because quite frankly, it's better together than better apart. More buying power together. Listen, I partner with 3 or 4 stores. We buy together. That allows us to reduce the cost of our inventory, pick up those variants, and figure out, look at each other's markets and figure out where we can kind of work between each other to help make it work. I mean, there are no enemies. There are only 2,600 local stores in the entire country. We are not enemies. And
that was a real simple philosophy. I was an action person. I didn't worry about what other stores were doing. I let them react to me. I did not react to them. They wanted to try to price discount, go right ahead. Like I was saying earlier, I just did my own thing. And, and if they were a decent competitor, they were honest, didn't cheat their customers, didn't try to rip me off, I'd send customers their way. I believe that, hey, the rising tide lifts all boats. Unfortunately, not a lot of retailers in this industry think that way.
It's interesting because we were just recognized by Go Collect as one of the most innovative stores this last year because of that fact. Because I recommend folks to, one of my great partners is Morse Comic Stash, great company. They also have another store called Cosmic Comics and Toys, another great place that I recommend to. We recommend stores because at the end of the day, it's more about the customer and less about myself. Again, it's no different than from banking. And RJ, because you're in the data piece of it. The bankers out there. The better banker understands if you can't do the loan, don't walk away. Refer them somewhere else. You won't lose everything if they can get their loan done. It's the same philosophy. And right now, in a world that's gotten slightly angrier, it's even more important to show kindness. And I don't believe that's a fluke. I think kindness wins every day, hand down. I might feel like I'm the only voice speaking this, but kindness wins hand down. Help make someone's, we tell every person that walks in my store, every one of my employees know this, and every person that works for me knows this. It doesn't matter if someone buys something. What matters is if you help make their day better when they leave. And that's what matters.
Yeah. What I always told my employees was when a customer comes in, he says, I'm looking for this. If we've got a $5 option and a $50 option, tell them about both. Don't try to push them towards a 50 because you're going to get them what they want. If they want the 50, great. If they want the $5, well, they're going to know that you gave them their bit choices and that you looked out for them. And so think down the road, because all these people put all this money and effort into get people in the doors, but then they try to cheat them or shortchange them when they do. When I closed my stores, I was selling boxes for $4.50 in a local area. Now, my competitors they're charging $25 for a box. Yeah, okay. Maybe you don't have me to keep the prices fair anymore, but man, that's people are going to remember what they're doing to them. An empty box, $25. That's raping your customers, and your customers know they're being raped. I mean, you don't treat your customers that way.
Yeah, and that's
I never recommend people to go to a store like that.
And that's the part we're not a fan of. I mean, and there is another thing that I'm such a big believer in. Right, here's how in my view and again. Coming as a local store owner, I spent a lot of time thinking about modeling, thinking about processes and what was the end game, what we were trying to create. So I went back to my background. I went back to looking at case studies of great brands that have figured out and have become multi-sensorial brands. Those that broke the mold, those that changed it where it stops being about the brand and really, like, a great example is Coke is about the easiest example I could make. People don't equate Coke with a drink. They equate Coke with memories. It's a multi-sensorial product. It's one that, at the end of the day, it creates a feeling inside of you that is both on all levels, and it allows you to feel good. It's called the perception of a win. Winning, especially, and again, RG, I'm talking to both of you guys. I'm probably just talking to the choir. Winning and losing is very hard to do, right? It's very hard to determine who's a winner and a loser in everything you do. But the perception of a win is so much more important than the actual win itself. How someone feels when they leave, how they feel about the process, how they feel about the honesty, how they feel about what you've done to give them that experience, that when they walk away, they feel great. And that is really our niche. That is what we do. We create a process that no matter whether they bought one thing or $2,000 from things, they're going to go out and say, God, Lord, this guy, wow, what an amazing experience. Or his team really went out of their way to do stuff. Like we do free movie nights in the summer. This is just something small that we do out here. I have a 25-foot screen where we're located. We have a cul-de-sac. So put a 25-foot inflatable screen out. We do a once-a-week movie because drive-ins are non-existent. We call it Movies That Don't Suck. We put it out every Saturday, and we put out a great movie. Free popcorn, free soda, bring your own chair.
See, that's one of the things that that Dave Dyer, who's one of our LCS guys, hadn't been on the show for a while, but he's got an in-shop area where he's got, the couches laid out. He's got the big screen up. Something's always on the big screen. There's a Godzilla
Got one right
movie.
behind me right here.
Yeah, always got something going.
Yeah, but it's back there somewhere.
I want to change tacks here just a little bit because we got a lot of people talking in the chat.
Absolutely.
And it's all scrolling past me now. Pops Van Zandt, of course, you know him, Fergel.
Of course. Hey, Pops.
Here. Brian Christgau's out there.
What's up,
Alex.
Brian?
P. Alex is out here. He's got a topic he wants to bring up because you brought up the indies and the support you're giving them, and I don't know how much they're supporting your sales or what your sales are, but the DC and Marvel are not in the top 5 publishers anymore.
It's a material game. They're just not putting enough out. They're not.
Oh, they're doing the superheroes. Yeah, they're not giving you diversity.
Boom has been huge for me. IDW, anime, of course, has been a massive. I've really had to. Thankfully, I've got a 14-year-old because I wasn't super like my anime began and end with Akira, so I had to quickly learn.
Eraser.
So we've gotten big on that. Guerrilla Comics, Black Box. These are some of the small indie companies, and they've had strong numbers for us. Again, they've done really well. And as I said, Boom Studios is probably one of my favorite ones. They put a lot of good stuff out there. Something's Killing the Children, Nice House on the Lake, Berserker. These are great. These take off for us. And right now we're starting to see I'm starting to add more indies as we continue to go forth. But it has been one where folks are talking about Godzillas and a lot of the kaiju, a lot of the horror comics are starting to make some comebacks right now. People are talking about that. There's a nice conversation in my area going on about that right now. So what we're doing is just spend a lot of time listening to our customers, and that's really critical for us. Listen to them, understand, and bring them what they want.
Yep. That's
Michael
the key.
Preaches that all the time.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another thing too that's more important in any successful business. Doesn't matter what your business is, what your product is, what your location is. It's your people. And you can have the best business in the world, you can have the best product in the world, but you got bad people, you're not going to make it. And I've had some good people over the years. I've also had bad people. And I'll tell you, those bad people, once they chase the customer off, they're gone forever because they're always going to remember that one bad person. They may be long gone and booted out the door, but they're always going to remember what that bad person did to them, and they'll never shop with you again. And
that's it. That's 100% it. So, there are ways to go through that because my background is such where I've really focused on understanding training, building teams, and figuring out who's, especially in commission-based environments and different opportunities and figure out who's there for what and how they're there for. But, I kind of built a good interview model that I'm training my manager on now, how to determine if that person is there and also put them through it. And quite frankly, I also work with some great organizations in the state of Michigan where I bring in disabled folks that have learning disabilities, because quite frankly, there's a market for all of it. There's a market for every bit of it. Now, again, I'm blessed enough that I've got a great leader, a great person. My wife is my partner. I know she doesn't love it, but she's great at managing. and she loves it, but not like I do. But she's just really kind, and so that makes so much better for everybody. And my manager is as much a nerd. I've never, I like to say a lone swordsman for so many years. It's really nice to be able to teach what I have developed over 22 years as a sales professional to someone who is younger than me, but has the same kind of like looking at them and going, that's a younger version of myself, and I can help them to grow. And so that's getting that idea, that dream, but you got to watch out, because a lot of guys, you can hear it in their voice that they're there for an hourly wage. Get them out the door, because that's the guy that's going to hurt you, not help you. That's going to be
when you go to multiple locations, that's when that's what happened to me. I'd have 2 locations. Well, I always had somebody working unsupervised, and that's where the problems would be. And one demographic I was always noticing, whatever store I was at, that's a store that did better. Well, that should be impossible. It should be whoever's coming in that day. Yeah. And so wherever I was at, that was a store that performed very well. Wherever it wasn't, that store underperformed. So, I had a few good people over the years, and they were worth gold. I do everything and I would keep some of them for long periods of time. That's how I stayed around for 40 years. But I'll tell you what, when you get those bad ones in there, sometimes it takes you a while to identify them, because they'll figure out which customers are talking to you. They'll give them the best service. If it's somebody they don't figure is going to talk to you, they'll just treat them terrible. And you got to find that out. And you can't tell that by looking at a camera system, because you can't hear what's being said. That's the most important thing is your people. And anybody who ever had a bad experience with my store, I apologize. And there were people I got rid of as soon as I knew about it. But
well, we also handle criticism extremely. That's another piece of being a unique, kind of my background. Criticism, the way I've always viewed the way comic stores handle criticism, they handle it with an affront. They handle it as though they have somehow been offended when a customer had a negative experience. There's a way to apologize without apologizing. There's a way to create a better experience and build it back to where even if someone is purposely trying to put a bad review out, it's only going to make them look bad. There's, again, all of this is just learning qualities that you have to figure out and understand, and make sure I think I've had a couple 3 stars where someone said we're higher priced, but it's really just about, even those folks, we focus less on, hey, listen, it's the experience. We use multiple sites. We let them know we're the small business, come back, give us another opportunity. And quite frankly, I've had a couple folks where I called them right out and said, listen, come on in. I'll give you if you don't like what I did, then I'll give you a discounted price. I'll come back and give you the difference in the price, just to see if that person was really being honest, or if that person was out there just trying to play games with the reviews. Because I understand, I get it. And that's the market we're in, right? And I wanted to mention something on the cameras. You can get cameras with volume, with the volume in there. I
can now.
Yes,
that's one thing I don't get about cameras. We've got these satellites here that can like zoom in on your license plate and tell if your sticker is expired or not. But somebody robs a 7-Eleven, you can't tell whether that was a man or a woman and whether they were carrying a gun or a broomstick. So it's like, get good cameras in your stores, people.
Well, you do. I mean, I'm going to put a plug in for Blink. I like Blink. Blink is an inexpensive, great way to get a good set of cameras.
And always have a good security system. It will pay for itself. And the first time somebody tries to rob you, I've had, like I said, I've been burglarized many times. The police always show up pretty quick, but what they can grab in that quick smash and grab, can sometimes do a lot of damage to you. And
luckily, the alarm company I'm with, and I'll put a shout out to All Star Alarm. They're the same alarm company that does the Michigan State Police. So that makes a huge impact for us in terms of, they do the local police department, they do the state police. They're the number 1 used company by police in the state of Michigan for their alarm system. So
I've had doors smashed in, windows smashed in. I had a guy come through the roof with an axe one time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I've been hit. Yeah, came through the roof with an axe. And that was my JFK location. Within the first week, I opened up that location. Guy came, chopped through.
Michael, we need to make a book for you. We need to actually publish a comic book called The Life and Times of Michael Tierney and make that about the comic stores, because I honestly think there's about 100 great stories inside of you right now.
A lot of them are horror stories. Matter of fact, I fought censorship battles with the state legislature. I'm about to start, or I'm kind of starting another one now. We've got another bill. About 20 years ago, I fought a bill called Act 851. That was kind of the start of my political career. I'm on the city council in Maumelle now, in the seat of the guy who wrote that bill I'm talking about. That the first one I fought, and he he said, well, hey, it's a great idea. Everybody should be able to have different standards of what's obscene and what's not. So let's just write a law where every local community decides what's considered obscene or not. So basically, he wrote it to where if somebody complains about something you sold, you broke the law retroactively. That's the most crazy thing you ever heard of. Well, now they got another bill. It's up in front of the Judiciary Committee right now. It's a local level, and so I've already, this one, the last one, it slipped past it. Nobody even knew it was coming. The guy got up in front of the Senate and he said, "Okay, this is a law to protect children from harm." 94% voted for it. Maybe 92% said, "Oh, well, I want to protect children from harm." Didn't even bother to read the thing to see what it says. And it was signed into law before anybody even knew about it. It got past the Library Association, everything like that. And the Library Association was willing to notice this one first, going, "Hey, now we got a Senate Bill 81. It's the same thing all over again, except they're trying to make it even more invasive. Come into your home. If you got possession of something, you can go to jail." And they're also targeting schools and libraries. And again,
there's so much more. There's so much more we could be doing. And this is, I'm a father of a 14-year-old. And so obviously I want to protect kids. I want to protect my son. I want to protect any kid. I mean, one of the things I went out of my way when I opened my store was I got certified by the Livonia Police Department to be a safe space, a qualified safe space. So anytime a kid goes by or anytime a kid's lost, we have a sticker on our thing that says we are a qualified safe space through our city so that they can come in. But at the end of the day, this is part of why I'm so passionate, right? I don't know. I love politics. I try not to get involved in it because I was given an opportunity to be in politics when I was in DC, and I chose not to do it mainly because I like my life and I like my family, and I don't want to drag them through the mud to deal in that world. But making a difference, a legacy, right? That's it. To me, it's about making a difference in the world, however we have to do. And what all these people out here making stinks about comic books or this or that or the other thing. What they don't understand is that I talk to teachers every day because I was a financial advisor for teachers, so I've got a lot of connections in a lot of school districts. Kids who read comics get at least a 20% higher grade average than kids who don't read, and read, and they're more likely to read books.
I had to fight that battle because I had teachers down here reading comics were bad for kids, and I managed to turn that around to where I was always their guest speaker at any time they'd have a summer university laureate for youth, because they recognize that, hey, comics are good for kids to read. I managed to win that battle because it was 40 years ago. It was a whole different story. But you talk about the politics and this and that. I was just recently reelected. When I was running for being reelected, people would ask me, "Well, why do you want to put up with this again?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of like Bruce Willis when he's going to that asteroid in Armageddon. He didn't go because he wanted to. He just didn't trust anybody else to do the job." So
I love that. By the way, thank you for somehow mentioning an Armageddon little phrase in there. I mean, honestly, I should just drink something because of that. There are games out there where you get to mention a certain movie. Anytime a Bruce Willis thing gets mentioned, I think we should definitely hit a drink because that's a great mention, right? I would say Nakatomi Tower. Just throw that right out there and let's
Christmas movie, yeah. I don't have anything to drink though.
It's okay. It's
learning how to read off comics. Fergel, I've told this story several times on different shows on this network here, but I was reading comics by the time I was 4 years old because I grew up in Sparta, Illinois, where every comic book in the world was printed. So there were no comic book stores. People took home print overruns like they were day-old donuts working at the bakery. So my comic shop was yard sales and, having friends whose dads worked at the plant and just having stuff to read. So I went all through kindergarten reading, and nobody knew I was reading because, I wasn't expected to. And I didn't tell anybody I could because I assumed everybody could. It was just a thing. It wasn't until I got into first grade where, they start teaching you how to read. And the teacher, I remember she had this big placard up there with big words on it, tall fonts and pictures. And I would just scan it and I'd be done. I'm 6 years old. I find more interesting things to do. By the time you get to that end of that sentence and change the card around, I can, play with that bug on the floor or, get my shoes tied again. And I looked up once and she was right in my face and she said, "Would you like to read to the rest of the class?" And, I'm 6. Sarcasm is like something I haven't learned yet.
Yeah.
So I just looked at the card and I said, "Plants create energy through a process called photosynthesis in which they absorb sunlight through their cells and produce chlorophyll." And it was like instant promotion to the next class. But it was like, well, of course they do. That's how the Floronic Man gained a bunch of energy to fight the Flash in the last issue. And all the time.
I love that.
You want to know about antimatter and matter? Don't let them touch. It's bad.
I love that. I love that. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. And there are stories. So for me, it's so much more personal. My parents went through a very difficult period, a very difficult separation, a very difficult thing. And I struggled with just male role model situation in my life, the kind of male role model I wanted to look for. And I kind of felt a bit of drift. And for me, it was Batman. Batman just, there's this thought process. And I just always, I'd read so many different superheroes, but this guy, a human being, no powers to speak of, but what he had, no one else seemed to possess, and how he could walk into a room and command respect from a guy who could wipe the floor of the planet with one arm tied behind his back, and still command respect. That just really drove something in me, this idea, that perseverance and having a plan. To this day, you ask my wife, we've got, I have a file cabinet marked my Bruce Wayne cabinet that has plans for plans for plans. I've even got one called Agamemnon. Just throwing out a little movie reference out there from a Batman cartoon. I got my Agamemnon contingencies, right? It's all about just that planning, that process, and really, I look at my son who had ADHD and is so smart, couldn't communicate with people. It was comics that helped to get him where he needed to get to. It was comics that taught him how to interact, just bubble conversations that taught him how to interact. And now he's doing phenomenally well, and he's a high school freshman. Yeah. And this is all about, to me, it's again, and also the fact that if somebody doesn't step up, there won't be comic books in 10 years because everyone's got their hand like this to a phone. So we've got to ensure that paper continues to be read, because the experience between a phone and paper is like a rock and a fire. It's two separate. It's unreal, right? I mean, the imagination gets exploded, and one just feeds your constant, addiction to this thing that sticks to your hand. And I'm a big believer that we can meet those folks that want to have stuff on their phone, but paper, there's nothing like it. That's why we focus on the beauty of the art. We focus on the stories. We focus on the art. I'm lucky enough that there's not you could throw any tidbit of superhero knowledge, and I usually have some knowledge on it. I know a lot about them, so I'm the guy that you want to have as phone a friend if you're ever on one of those shows, because there's nothing I don't know about most of this stuff.
Well, one thing that's going to be a danger for the comic book industry, you talk about paper, how important it is, and yeah, I'm all about that tactile experience of print. But in recent last 2.5 years, I mean, the print costs, I'm surprised we haven't seen a super inflation in the cover price of comics, because the cost of paper is skyrocketing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a logistical nightmare of this pandemic. I mean, it's not just the cost of paper; it's eggs, it's lettuce, it's pretty much everything in this world.
It's the comic industry, and it's been volatile. It's like I've got a big project that just went to the printer, Robert E. Howard Art Chronology. The Edgar Rice Burroughs Art Chronology, when that was released 5 years ago. I mean, this is like gigantic, oversized. This is 1,200 pages on the Edgar Rice Burroughs one. It was a $250 price point for the 4-volume set in a slipcase hardcover. And then the Robert E. Howard one, it's 1,600 pages, and its price point is going to be $350 a set, because the price of paper has gone up so high, 250% in just the last couple of years. And so I'm surprised we don't have $9.95 comics yet.
I think we're going to, I think by the end of 2023, middle of 2024, because we moved to a just-in-time economy, and unfortunately in a just-in-time economy, it just takes something like the pandemic. I think people are starting to realize how crucial industries are. That's why you're starting to see some pullback on industries that were disappearing overseas, starting to repatriate. I think that the logistical nightmares that we're currently incurring or dealing with should settle out by the end of this year, middle of next. Now, even with the topsy-turvy pandemic world, I still think that we're going to figure that out. And the price of books have gone up. I mean, there's no doubt, right? I've got books in here for $10, $7, and more importantly, we've got to help people. That's why we try to. We don't have a ton of dollar boxes, but we do have some of those dollar books, and we try to give part of our subscription services. You get 2 books, you get 1 free, right? We try to always offer, and we do that for the first 3 to 6 months. It may cost a little bit, but what it does do is it creates relationships and allows me to let people know that they still matter as much as what I'm trying to do. I know that seems detrimental to the business model, but I've seen nothing but success come from it. We're negotiable. We work with people on pricing. We give discounts. We give sales every week. We do unique items, but the biggest thing for us right now, and I think the untapped market for us, is social media penetration. So we're working on a whole lot of content and creating some content processes that are going to allow us to push less about, still kind of focusing on that comic, but also because of all these different social media channels, like for us, one of the undiscovered countries, and we're starting to dive into it, is TikTok. Even with everything going on, TikTok is now fast becoming the most appreciable channel for social media. And I think a lot of folks, even though they got that Chinese thing, I believe what will end up happening is they'll divest, they'll end up coming out, because you're just not turning off TikTok. At 2 billion new users on a monthly basis, you're not turning that off. So it's not going away, even if it's being restricted. And I honestly think that the monetization in social media is really, it's multiple streams. That's part of the success of a store. You cannot be 100% reliant on one income stream in order to be successful. It's got to be 9 or 10 separate streams of income in order to allow you to do what you want to do and build. That's what we're building a model to do. That's how I'm going to hopefully, I don't want to say single-handedly, but hopefully when we create what we're doing, and ultimately my goal is to get to 30 to 35 stores, because I've done the math. I know what the numbers look like with all the processes per each store. We should be able to, change some of the power, get to the table in a way that other stores have not been able to do outside of a place like Midtown, which has, a different story altogether, and really start pushing change to create different models to help these store owners create tools instead of turning them away, to help these store owners be successful so they can grow in the way that they can continue, because superheroes aren't going away. Stan Lee up there is up there with Thomas Edison. He's up there with Steve Jobs. It's not going away. Even if it changes, it's not going away. And really, at the end of the day, it's up to us, those at the vanguard, those at the tip of the spear, to do what we can to save an industry that, quite frankly, saved us all.
Well, there's a solution to the paper problem. Hemp, there for so long, because marijuana was illegal, hemp was illegal in America. The Constitution was written on hemp paper. It's renewable. It's much better paper, and it's not so caustic to produce. It's like, pulpwood, you have to bleach it out. I mean, it's very toxic. We've got pulp manufacturing plants down here in Arkansas, and it's awful. And one time when I come from the printing industry, so that's my background. And one time we printed all the Weyerhaeuser paper maps of all their forests here in Arkansas. And so I had an old 1969 Grand Sport 400. I dropped the engine in myself. I could not get stranded in that thing. And I was out there on trails using that map, and nobody even knew what the trails were there. I was like a mountain goat going on these things. And I mean, it was incredible, but you just see they just clear cut whole sections at a time. So, with when you get with hemp, you don't have to do that. You can grow so many crops repeatedly on the same place, and it's not so caustic. You don't have to bleach it to get to that white paper. And, so that's where the future is. I mean, we just aren't there yet. For some reason, they're just not going in that direction. But hemp is where the future is. We just got to get people to realize it. And actually, it should replace most of the plastics, too. Very biodegradable. Hemp is an answer to so many things. Now that it's finally gotten to where it's not illegal to have in America again, that's where I think our future should be, as far as the comics should be printed on hemp paper.
Well, and as long as an industry, we're still so fragmented. As long as an industry, we continue to stay fragmented, meaning that there is no cohesive voice to the point to get up there. We're always going to be in a gladiatorial battle pit. We're always going to have people who are fighting each other, trying to undercut each other. We're always going to be worried about what costs we have to deal with. The power is with the people. It just needs a voice to help make that happen. The power is always been.
I was an advocate to get that thing started.
Yeah.
I was like, look, to fund it, all we got to do is create a credit card system where all of our vendors, everybody who's a member, they get this credit card system. A tiny percentage of your fees go to fund the organization, and they'll still have a cheaper rate than they can get on their own. And it's still going today. But I quit the organization that I helped found right away because I could tell right away that they were not looking out for the interests of everybody. You had the people who were on the board of directors. They were just they were getting deals and variants just for them, not offered to the membership. And when I was confronting them about it, they're like, well, hey, if you were in our position, you'd do the same thing. Okay, so you say, it's so you steal, so everybody else is a thief. Nah, I disagree with that. That's why I quit. But, I'd also tried to run on the board. They wouldn't put my name up for nomination. And so
you were too fair. You were a fair guy, and fair guys sometimes have a struggle and a fight. So, the way I view it,
didn't want the Midwestern voice.
Yeah.
East Coast to West Coast, and these guys from the Midwest, you were advocate for putting guidelines on comics, which, I'm fighting censorship battles down here. I need to make sure I don't sell the wrong thing, wrong person, because I'm a target. And so they thought, oh, well, you're a censor because you don't want to sell pornography. Like, look, I don't care what you make. I'm not saying you can't make anything. Just don't put me in a situation where I'm selling something I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like in that Robert E. Howard chronology that I just sent off to the printer. I got very upset. Like, I collected all the Conan stuff. And I was, writing about Dark Horse and all the Conan comics they made. Well, they had this one where they ran frontal nudity on an advertisement for a variant cover they had, which frontal nudity, but they ran an ad for it in the regular comic. And there was a big brouhaha about it. They had to do a recall, take those books back, reprint them, and send them out with that taken out. So what do they do? Not long after that, I didn't know they did this. There's a thing called Conan, Song is of the Dead, and it's written by Joe Lansdale. So as I'm starting that section, I'm complimenting him because he and I are exclusive members of a 2-band group, and we're both the only writers who've also collaborated with Edgar Rice Burroughs on the Tarzan short story. A posthumous collaboration. He did Tarzan.
You collaborated with Edgar Rice Burroughs?
Yeah, I did Tarzan. Yeah, the Mysterious She, young Tarzan.
Okay, this face is just not going to go away at this point. I know who Edgar Rice Burroughs is, and now I'm going to have to keep this face
I
like
write
this.
an online strip for them, and I used to color it too. Beyond the Farthest Star that comes out on a weekly basis. So yeah, I'm very tight with him because I did that chronology, and so I got to know him very well. And but so then I'm doing the Robert E. Howard chronology, and so I'm complimenting on that. And then I get to reading a book, and I'm like, oh my God, this thing could have cost me everything. The one thing that you cannot have is like, frontal nudity. It can get you in trouble, right?
Yes, it can.
A turgid, you know what I mean by turgid? Penis.
Stiff.
Yeah, there's no defending that. You're not going to, anybody's going to say, yeah, that's pornography. There's no saying it's not. And even if it's on a statue, and that's what it was, a statue.
Yeah.
It was broken off the statue. Conan is wearing that penis around his neck to the whole thing. Now it's more of a pointed thing, so it doesn't really look like it. But then there's 2 other places in the story where Conan has to use this broken off penis to unlock a door. It's clearly a vagina. I mean, it just, and he has to insert the key to unlock it and turn it to open it. And then later there's another lock that's a human head. He's got to put it in the mouth. I'm like, my God.
Is that a Larry Flint story or
That was in a movie series called Conan, Songs of the Dead. And so I started out complimenting Joe, like, man, this guy could have cost me everything. But that's not necessarily Joe's fault. That's Dark Horse's fault for, not, letting anybody know what was going on, because Dark Horse never put any kind of guidelines. Now, to protect myself from Dark Horse, and it did save my rear end on this, I always said, well, look, if they're not going to tell me, I'm going to treat every Dark Horse comics like it's a mature comics, and I would always bag a mature. So no kid ever saw that in my store. So that was never had access to a child. So I never got nailed on it, which thank goodness. But I'm wondering about, this is what I put in my book. I said, look, if you're a retailer out there and you got that in your 50-cent bins, look out, you got dynamite, a stick of dynamite out there in your bins that could cost you everything. And whatever you do, don't ship it and sell it over the internet and ship it by mail. Oh my God, federal offenses. I mean, it's a landmine. And here they just got in trouble like the year before on something like that. And then, let's just really top it off. And then nobody noticed. Well, I never read it until I got ready to do a review on it. And I was like, my God, I was angry. I really was. And so,
I would be equally as angry. So I'm gonna switch topics. I'm gonna ask you guys a question. What's your favorite superhero? Who's your favorite superhero?
Hold on just a second, because I do want to read this super chat. We want to make sure we take care of our fans here, because I don't get that many of them. So when I get a super chat, I really want to read it. This comes from Jason Sandberg, who is the writer of Jupiter, independent comic, which is, I read this, I reviewed it on stream. Reading Jupiter is like listening to Tori Amos music. I have no idea what it's about, but I want to listen again. So it's interesting. If you can find Jupiter online, do check it out. It will be coming soon. I read the Ashcan version. He says the scent of newsprint, paper, and ink is part of the comic book experience. I absolutely agree. I'm a DC guy growing up, because even though I had access to the Marvel comics, for whatever reason, the combination of their paper and ink gave little me a headache. So it was like this, negative feeling towards Marvel comics at the time. I missed out on a lot of good stories, I know, but I would get ill. So I was like, I don't want to read that right now. I don't feel like getting a headache. He said paper costs are coming down, which would be nice. I buy paper cardboard all the time. It's
sticker shock on the bill.
But have a great weekend. Jason, you have a great weekend too. And thank you so much for the $5 super chat. We really appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Favorite superheroes. Is this one of your interview questions, Fergel? Because
no, I always loved it. You could tell a lot about where I think when you ask a person. I mean, there's so many great questions, right? That I think about when I talk to folks in this industry. But when you ask a person who their favorite superhero is, what you find out it's less about the superhero and more about why. There's a lot of because remember, there's a lot of heroes, and this is again probably one of the most important things that cannot be underspoken enough is that heroes are human. Heroes have problems. Heroes have issues. And sometimes becoming a hero is just a matter of circumstance, place, and opportunity. It's not the lack of fear. It's the ability to overcome fear. And really, at the end of the day, that's part of why I ask people what their favorite superhero is, because it kind of tells me kind of where they're, what they think about, how they think about certain things, and where they go.
Well, Michael, I'll let you start.
Well, I have never been a superhero fan. I mean, I saw all these superhero comics. I don't have a single superhero comic in my personal collection. Everybody thinks I've got Action Comics #1. I don't. I never was a superhero guy. My favorite comics when I was a kid growing up, Tarzan of the Apes, Turok, Son of Stone, a couple Native Americans trapped in a valley filled with dinosaurs, Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck. Karl Barks I always thought was the greatest comic storyteller of all time, both combination of art and storytelling. But if one character I guess might be called a superhero, Magnus Robot Fighter, a guy in the year 4000 fighting robots with his bare hands. So that was what I liked.
You actually named off about 4 different heroes. Turok is actually a great, amazing story.
Oh,
Scrooge is an amazing story. Scrooge McDuck, an amazing story. That tells me all kinds of things about you as an individual. Tells me you're a great grandpa. Tells me you're an amazingly person, but you also know the value of $1. And it tells me that you know how to have fun and you're adventurous and you'll find yourself wherever you need to. And quite frankly, you're more at home in the forest than probably in the city.
Probably so. Yeah, that's all very true. Yeah. I didn't end up with 3 cubic acres of money. I ended up with 3 cubic acres of comics. But I do have, instead of 3 nephews named Huey, Dewey, and Louie, I do have 3 nephews named Danny, Denny, and Donnie. So,
RG, I'll bet I can read you as well. What's your favorite superhero?
I spent most of my young life. I had bunk beds. Okay, so I was the older. And I slept on top, and I had this hand-drawn picture of George Washington that I drew and taped it to the wall. But when trouble arose, I would take that picture and flip it around, and there would be an arrow with the words "to the Batcave," and then I would slide down the post on the end of the bunk bed and bump my nose a couple of times and run off to solve things. But despite all of that 6-year-old, 7-year-old cosplay, my favorite superhero has always been the Flash, because I would learn something in every book, because there would be a Flash fact.
Gardner Fox was the writer, yeah.
Yeah, you would.
That tells me a lot about you as well. I mean, it tells me you're investigative. It tells me that you like to kind of put your place where sometimes where it doesn't belong. You've got a lot going on. Your mind moves fast. You think fast. You operate fast. There's a lot happening, but you're also detail driven, because he's a dichotomy. The Flash is a dichotomy of both being fast as a runner and being slow as a police investigator. So there's a tremendous. And always late in his own personal life. So, I mean, that's why I say, to me, it's Batman, right? But if I were to say one character that really takes it up for me would probably be, it's Wolverine. I've always been. It's not that I'm a fighter. I'm a Navy guy. I've had my scrapes, but it's just that Wolverine is just one of those guys that has lived life across centuries, and just done some amazing things, and has always been at the center of so many amazing stories. And for being, he's always the guy that you least expected, right? He's a runt. He's like I'm probably doing the exact height of Hugh Jackman in a portrayal. I think he's about that big at this point, but it's always the runt going out there and being the guy that always punches up and always comes away winning again, right? And so obviously Batman for the planning, but Wolverine just for the sheer love of the character. And I truly love Wolverine. I'm so excited for Deadpool 3. Just because
I was going to ask you which Wolverine it was, because in X-Men you always had that Wolverine who could go berserk. He could get into that berserker rage, and you're like, oh, here it comes.
Uncanny X-Men 133. That's where he really came alive.
Yeah, and
I
then
like
that series, you're like, well, let's give him body count now, because obviously he's got claws and he uses them.
I like the Ronin series. I'm a big fan of the Ronin series. When he went out, that was just such a great series for Wolverine. I always enjoyed those books. And obviously, there have been so many different. Like I have a lot of what ifs of Wolverine. I have a lot of books in that area. So I'm just anything in X-Men. I always like the X-Men stories. Some of the graphic TPBs are really great. Yes, Claremont and Miller. That is probably one of the best arcs. Jason, thank you. I mean, Claremont, by the way, is just amazing. Frank Miller, amazing. I mean, you just keep going on and on and on and on. Mark Miller, amazing. And again, those arcs are just things I love. And again, those are just some of the characters that I love. But I look at, that's part of what we do. We find out what people's nerd is. I mean, I saw a comment in the chat where it's no more BO, no more smell like closets. No, my wife makes sure the smells of our store are always gorgeous. We get complimented on how our store smells as much as we get complimented on the customer service experience.
Aromatherapy is a thing. That's why people like us don't mind going down into a musty basement filled with old paper, because it's like,
I'd have people come into my store and say, thank God, finally a comic book store I can take my kids into that doesn't look like I'm taking them into a porno shop, because, I was always trying to have a family-friendly environment. But on your point about the musty paper, and I read this article in the newspaper a long time ago, and I cannot find any verification anywhere on the internet, because the internet does scrub information that we're not supposed to know. And what the article had said, and I wish I'd clipped it, was that there's a certain type of mold that actually does create, with old paper and old print, does create a little bit of a psychedelic experience. And so, when I was a kid going to the library and reading all those old Edgar Rice Burroughs books of John Carter of Mars and Tarzan of the Apes, I probably
love John Carter of Mars.
I'm probably taking more of a trip to Mars than I realized. So.
It's a great story. Are you kidding me? I mean, again, and I go back, Tarzan's an amazing story. And actually, that story is making a comeback. There's some comeback stories. I think, because of the way the popularity of mining past storylines, I think we'll see a Tarzan movie. I think we'll see a new one come out. I think we'll see another remake of John Carter of Mars. I think they'll figure out.
I was pitching an idea for a new Tarzan movie to the Burroughs people, and they liked my idea so well about a complete reinvention for the modern age. I said, well, write it up as a novel. And so I sent that into them, and they're still reading it. They haven't read it yet to decide, what they're going to do with it. But when I first pitched it, that's how we should make our next movie.
Those are kick-ass. I'm just looking at those going, those are kick-ass.
I found a used bookstore around here that
those are kick-ass.
And I'm still getting into this superhero, by the way, who I was introduced to through DC Comics way back in the day.
Oh my gosh!
But this is from the same guy who invented Doc Savage.
Yeah.
Mike, are you going to get the brick?
No, I was getting the. He was talking about the Tarzan story I wrote earlier.
So that is really a cool book right there. Wow! And then your name's right under there. That's awesome.
What it was a fragment that nobody knew what to do with it, because it had continuity problems that people were afraid it would contradict continuity. And I knew exactly what to do with it and how to solve some continuity problems at the same time. So I wrote that, and they loved it. And but what was funny is I was working on the chronology, and this had gotten lost. What it was is I wrote that at the request of Danton Burroughs, Edgar Rice Burroughs' grandson. Well, then he died tragically. The Burroughs' offices caught on fire the day he was made president of the corporation. Sandra Graff had retired, and he had been promoted to president. Well, there was a fire at the offices that night. His dad, John Coleman Burroughs, who had illustrated a lot of the books, his original paintings were all over the walls. A lot of them got destroyed in the fire, and he had a heart attack and died that night. Well, this story that I'd written kind of got lost. The original fragment, of Burroughs was with another guy. So, and then the next guy comes in, and Jim Solis, who's coming in to help him. Well, he ends up being put in charge, and of course, he doesn't have the background that Dan had, and he had no knowledge of this at all. And so, as we're in the final, days of getting that Edgar Rice Burroughs art chronology, which he was asking about, let me grab the monster.
Go grab that. Go grab that brick. You're on here with a couple of writers tonight, Fergel.
You both write professionally?
I've written for the Remo Williams The Destroyer series. So
Remo Williams?
Yeah, Remo Williams.
They made the movie about?
They made the movie about, yeah.
Oh my God. Oh.
Yeah, there's like 150 of those books that are out there and about. So again, more that I found at that used bookstore. But this is Michael's earlier brick. He's making a bigger one now.
Yeah, this is a little one. And
Wow.
this one, it goes through all the old pulps, Egress Burrows. I give you the entire history. And there's a lot of restoration done to return some of these old pulps that were over 100 years old to make them look like they were brand new again.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow.
Field here.
And of course, people can find a link to get that off of thewildstars.com, which is linked below this video. Fergel, I also have your Facebook page for
Yeah,
Gotham
please.
Knights.
And our website is www.comicbooklivonia.com. So we're actually going to be switching that, but right now that is so gorgeous. That is so gorgeous. I'm looking at something here that is beautiful. And again, it only seeks to illuminate and create further opportunity for me when I think about the fact that you mentioned 100-year-old books. This is the written story and the comic book and the pictorial book, if you will. We'll just call it back to pictorial book. Has so many more. It's so much older than us. And again, the fact that the technology has progressed to a point where our imaginations can be replicated only by the strength of our ability to build these things out only continues to make me more excited. And that's why I'm so passionate about this. That's why I'm so keen to, and part of one of our companies that we're working on building is a publishing company. So we're actually going to focus, that's something that I've got partners that are working on. Because again, multi-channel business, it's a group that we're building here. In order to control the destinies that we want to have, we are looking to do some things that just have not been done before. And we're going to do them. I know it's crazy, but we're going to do them.
And
we have the publisher of Kursova magazine here says he'll get you those copies of those Kursova magazines at wholesale if you.
Listen, thank you, Mr. Alexander.
Here's something else you can get for you for wholesale. This is the compilation of my first 4 Wild Stars novel. Beautiful wraparound cover by Ant Knox. And because Wild Stars originally started as a series of comics, and this has all of those in it. Plus,
you wrote that book?
Oh yeah. Matter of fact, some of this that you're seeing right now is my artwork, and so it started out as a comic, and then converted over to a novel after that, and so with illustrations. And
oh my God, I didn't realize I was on with Stars. I feel like I just had a meeting with Stars over here. What's going on with me? I don't even understand this.
And Kursova magazine is serializing my Wild Stars novels in every issue of their Kursova magazine, and then they'll put it out in a novel format. So you can get on those too.
That is so dope. I don't even know what to describe it like. You guys are the 2 dopest dudes I've met all day. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm just going to put that out there. And by the way, your response on Facebook as to the misspelling of Knights, that is going to be classic for me forever. That is amazing because we do blame DC for that. And that was part of when I opened the store. Actually, that was one of the biggest pieces I had to spend money on was to ensure that because Warner Brothers has one of those reputations as going after everyone without fail. They come a fight with both guns a blasting, but so does Marvel. Like I actually know guys who do work. My brother works in the industry, so I know guys who do work. And if you get the T1 line in your house, they don't even argue about the money you make. I mean, like they monitor you on your computer, they monitor everything you do. And when it came to Gotham Knights, I had to dig into this because I know that there was another company that made a comic or a game that kind of it just bordered on touching on Gotham Knights, and they got sued. They got sued to the point where they stopped producing the game. I mean, so it's just something that one of the things I spent a lot of time was ensuring that we could build a brand that could withstand any scrutiny as it continues to scale up.
Yep, you got to get the trademark lawyers involved.
I can tell you about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can. You can. I've been seeing more stories about that lately too, about trademarks and stuff. One more topic that's come up here tonight, and it's so fun having 2 LCS guys. I looked up and I'm like, wow, an hour and 20 minutes has gone by yet already, and we're still talking and we haven't lost any energy. But Alexander's brought up, the fact that the big 2 are putting out all these floppies, and there's so many of them. And Michael, we've talked about this where people want longevity in a series. They're putting out miniseries or one and dones. I want to add to that the fact that, if anytime an indie is done publishing, Marvel comes up with a way to make a new book to eat that shelf space, because, that's the wider presence, the more books they sell. So So what is your thought on all the miniseries, and how do you control the encroachment of the big two into the indie space in your stores? How do you make it fair for everybody and say, no, we got you stick in your corner there. We got plenty of you.
Now I don't have to deal with that so much anymore because I just order what people say they want. So, but used to, I would try to carry all the variant covers, but I had a real simple system though. I had custom built shelves with full facings for every cover, and I gave Marvel the top row, DC's second, and all the other publishers, and they still got full facings, the third and fourth row. So half of my shelf space was always dedicated to the independents, and just Marvel. Hey, that's your section. If you want to crowd yourself, you're crowding yourself. Same thing with DC.
We take a little bit of Michael's approach in the sense that my customers tend to dictate, but because I'm so new in the space, I have done a tremendous amount of we're reorganizing a lot of ourselves. So when I first bought out, I tried to hold a bit. We've got a unique shelf space in the store. We've got it set up to where I've got 2 rows of Marvel, 2 rows of DC, and then I've got 1 row of indies. And so we keep that shelf space going forward. But again, because of the way we operate, my customers, and I've got customers that'll wander through and pick through books, but the way my sales staff operates, we bring recommendations to create cross-sale opportunities. So most of the way my space is set up is we'll pull out, when a customer comes through and we start getting to know them, we know where they're at, we can pull out different stories, whether it's Marvel, DC, or wherever, and just kind of focus on those stories and allow them to put back the book. So my customers don't always have to go through the shelves. Again, it's about creating that experience. They can if they want to, but it's about making it easy to find titles they wouldn't otherwise find. And it's about making sure that in every conversation we have, we're always recommending at least 1 to 3 different indies in every conversation. Just what's your favorite title? What's your opportunity? Where do you want to be at? Where can we get you there? And that's been part of our story. That's been part of our process. That's why 8 Billion Genies is one of the hottest selling books in my store, because it's such, I caught wind of it, I read it, and I personally read quite a few of the books in these stores, so that when I'm able to give a recommendation, it's one that's backed up by something more than just you should buy this.
I got a story you'll love. It's talk about listening to your customers. Had this little old lady come in, and she had been told that her son-in-law was going to be doing an adult comic. So she was going to all the X-rated shops in town. All of them have been closed down by the police since then. But she was, this lady looked like church lady. As I'm sure when she walked in, I was like, hey, she was going to support her sister's son-in-law. And I'm sure they were like, it's a raid whenever she walked through the door. But then finally somebody said, look, man, why don't you try going to a comic book store and asking for that? So she came in and said, can you order me this book called Strangers in Paradise? So I ordered the first issue, kind of glanced at it when it came in and said, hey, I think I can sell this off the shelf. And so I had probably one of the best selling for my demographics. Stranger in Paradise sold better in my store, probably did in some of the bigger stores out like in San Francisco and like that. Because I knew to carry it from the beginning, and so I knew to build the audience. And so again, you just listen to your customers, and carry what they're asking for. That is a key thing. But it was kind of funny because I got the story from Terry Moore himself, because I told you I was up for a retail a year back. I think it was 99 or 2000. Mm-hmm. And that was the last year they opened up a day early just for the vendors, which was great because you were outnumbered. The retailers were outnumbered by the vendors because they weren't letting the general public in. They don't do that anymore. And so they were all just bored for something to do. And like, hey, come talk to us. And Terry Moore was like, hey, I got to tell you this story. Oh, so you're where she bought that at, And then he told me the rest of the story about how she'd gone to all the porno shops.
Oh, that's so awesome. Terry Moore has a Kickstarter underway right now. I've got a note on my phone to go in there on the last day and make sure I get my order in. Just a sketchbook, Francine and Kachu and all that, all Strangers in Paradise stuff. He's got a beautiful style to his thing.
Independents are great. Like Jeff Smith, if you ever met him and his wife, VJ, she runs his publishing company for him. He does the Bone stuff, and there's the independence is where you're getting the energy and the new concepts. And so, your wife. That's why I gave half my shelf space to independents. You got to acknowledge the Marvel. That's why I always had them up top. But in the DC, but the independents is where the growth is, and that's where I gave half of my shelf space to independents.
I agree.
And Fergel, that's why I just dropped you a Facebook DM a little bit ago during the show here. Get to it after the show. We'll talk. But we're at the point in the show now where this is where we talk about the last 2 weeks, because typically we would have seen you 2 weeks ago, Fergel, and it just carried on. And I hope your wife is doing okay now. I know that
she is. She is. It's been a bit of a struggle. Actually, she's texting me. I wonder when I'm coming home. She's like, because she thought, so she's like, oh, why are we bringing me? Because my wife, amazingly enough, a week after we opened the store, my wife for 22 years had a heart attack, a massive heart attack. So it's just taken her a long time to recover. It wasn't the normal heart attack that you would normally get, which is a blocked artery. This was a pericarditis heart attack. And the reason I know this is not only my healthcare background, but my dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse, so I grew up in the healthcare space. So it was a water around the heart attack, which if you're those who are kind of inclined to understand, it's a much more devastating long-term impact. It's very similar to a stroke. Less like a heart attack and similar to a stroke. So we've had to learn to adapt, and we're constantly doing that now. And it's, I don't know if I have the strength that she has. I'm just impressed. She's a fighter. I mean, yeah, she's doing a lot better.
We're going to wrap you up so you can take some food home to her and make her more comfortable here. This is the point where we talk about the last 2 weeks. People coming in and out of the store or ordering a mail order. What did you buy that sold out? What did you buy that you're looking at on the shelf? Say, wow, I wish I hadn't bought so many of those.
Oh gosh, I would start by telling you what has been really, it still continues to be my most popular book is Spawn versus Batman. I'm up to about 40 copies out the door on that one, all different variants. People, it's amazing. There's a hunger for Spawn and Batman. There is a hunger for Spawn and Batman. And I think, it was a one-shot book, and it is, out of most of the books I have right now, that's the one that's jumping. I'd say my Gold Goblin is phenomenal. Anything Spider-Man's always amazing. And really right now, Extreme X-Men has been a very popular title. What I'm looking at that I'm definitely unhappy with has quite frankly been some of the Star Wars stuff. Star Wars, I think they're putting out so many titles in Star Wars. Halcyon Legacy, they're putting out Bounty Hunters, Chewbacca. It's the same story that I say about the movies, man. You gotta bring new material. Now, what's interesting, the other one that's been very interesting is the Hidden Blade. That's Hidden Empire, Hidden Blade have been some of the best selling Star Wars, but folks are blowing past that, right? And obviously 8 Billion Genies is one. And I'm kind of excited about this Avengers Forever, just because I think that's an interesting storyline.
That's a good one for me too.
It's a multiversal storyline. And I think they've really, again, it's one of those accidental stories that Marvel jumped into that
War Across Time has done well also.
Which one?
War Across Time.
War Across Time did really well. War Across Time. And fun fact, Amazing Spider-Man is putting out, in conjunction with Disney, a Disney cover once a month. People aren't aware of that, but there's a Disney cover coming out every single month in the off-number comic. So that's a variant that's going to be coming out every month for the rest of this year to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of Disney. So they'll take an existing Marvel cover and put everybody in there as a Disney character.
Yeah, the most recent one was a remake of the Fantastic Four #1 cover,
right.
With Donald Duck as the Thing, and you had
right.
Mickey and Minnie and Goofy. So yeah.
That's right.
For me, it's the titles that do well are the titles that are long running. Avengers, now they'll do like those little offshoot series, like Forever and War Against Time, but that's appealing to a title whose main core audience will follow to another main series. Mm-hmm. What is not doing well are super tiny miniseries, one shots. This whole Lazarus Planet, I mean, it's not done as a series; it's done as nothing but a sequence of one shots, and almost nobody cares. I've got like a couple of people, and that's it. You're relaunching the whole DC universe, and you're doing it in a format that nobody wants, and it's a bomb.
Well, they've also gone off the deep end in terms of catering to ideologies instead of telling great stories, and that's.
I used to have so many military customers, police, all people in law enforcement. I lost all that business. It's like one guy who was in the military, described it best. He goes, "Hey, I'm tired of DC telling me I'm a baby killer." Yeah, they don't want to hear that ideology anymore. Like, you can have that.
You can have it. It's important, but you got to start with the story first. I'm sorry, RJ. You were saying something, my friend?
No, I was just talking about the Lazarus Planet thing, where I picked up one of the Lazarus Planet one shots because I'm thinking, one shot, give me a chapter of this story, and it was an anthology of intro chapters that were all hey, this is an advertisement story for this other series.
Yeah.
So it was 4 other Lazarus Planet series. none of them I wanted to read. The thing I am reading is you know how the DC movie universe has that subset called the Zack Snyder universe, and everyone's like a huge fan of that. I'm a fan of the subset of the DC Comics universe called the Jeff Johns universe.
Ooh, who isn't a Jeff Johns fan? CCS
stuff he did with Flashpoint Beyond.
Michigan. Yeah, I mean he's brilliant. He's brilliant. And I'll go back to
Beyond was the underrepresented, undermarketed thing that actually did reboot the DC universe from its core. So, you had Justice Society spin out of that. You had the New Golden Age spin out of that. Stargirl, The Lost Children spinning out of that. I'm reading all of those books, and it's got that old DC universe flavor to it again that made me a
Green
fan.
Lantern for the Trumpster into being a top seller.
Yeah. That's amazing.
We got to get DC and Marvel books back into the top 10 again. We got to get Superman back into the top 10.
We need to get rid of David Zaslav. I'm going to say it right now. Can I just put this on here? We need to get rid of Zaslav. I don't know why they put the executive of Discovery in charge of Marvel movies or DC movies. The guys that and I love James Gunn. I'm probably going to get some Flashpoint back. I think he's a great guy. I think he's definitely got some thing. But if you're going to tell a story that you want to attract people into the whole genre, you damn sure better make sure it's cohesive. And right now it's incohesive and a lot of flubs. And it's just been the model for the last decade. They've not gotten out of that model for the last decade. And unfortunately, they're going up against the Feige machine. And that guy's got it. I mean, he's figured it out. And it's interesting because Feige and Johns both worked for Lucas. They both worked in the Lucas Ranch place. Johns came out of Detroit. I mean, just went to CCS. I mean, Detroit born, Detroit everybody. I mean, it's just amazing. And I realized he had his bond with Batman versus Superman, but I honestly think it wasn't just him. It was Hamada. It was a bunch of guys that really came in at the last minute and just kind of tortured that movie to death. And unfortunately, this is the world we keep living in with DC. They've got better properties, and they haven't figured out how to use those properties.
Reminds me of what got Joe Quesada in trouble.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing. The thing that Joe Quesada said about DC having Superman and not knowing what to do with him.
Fergel looks like he doesn't know what we're talking about.
Quesada basically said DC's like the porn star with the biggest schlong, and he doesn't know how to use it.
Yeah, well, that would be Dirk Diggler, right? Just not figuring out how to make it work, not knowing what's going on with it. Yes, they do have, and that to use that last Superman point, getting rid of Henry Cavill was the dumbest move that company could have done, right? Yeah. There is no other character in existence other than Superman that is the most important character since 1938. I mean, that guy
did a great job with it.
And it's very, very hard to be able to be folksy and shucksy and be the most powerful being in the universe. And there have only been two people I've seen that have done it well: Christopher Reeves and Henry Cavill. And everyone else in between, they do things, but they're not great. I mean, if I were in charge, I would have said this Ellsworth. Let's make a Red Sun. If we're going to have to make that change, let's give everybody a Red Sun Superman. Let's give everybody a Kingdom Come story. Let's introduce something that makes it work. And again, chapter Gods and Monsters. All right, let's think about this. We can't build a universe on Amanda Waller because she is not Sam Jackson. I love Viola Davis, but she is not Sam Jackson.
I got a movie. I don't know about you, but I thought actually was a good movie.
It was, but she's still not Sam Jackson. She's got some skills, but she's not got those.
Push that whole movie away. Like, okay, maybe we'll do that later. That's why they got rid of Cavill, and I thought that was a mistake. Yeah,
100%, Mr. Alexander. Except for the first Superman, that was the Man of Steel was a good movie. I thought it was a good movie because it hit on some great themes. And I thought they had good characters and good representation of Krypton. I loved Russell Crowe as Jor-El. I thought that was, again, hard title to get in play. And I absolutely love that guy who played General Zod. I thought he was, I don't remember his name, but damn, he did a good job. He did a great job.
I could never get to the theater before somebody would run movies for me. So I quit trying. And so fortunately, I watched all those Cavill movies later when they came out on Blu-ray, and I would get the extended cut that had the rest of the story and it make sense. So I didn't watch the awful version. And, I'd watch the extended cut that made a lot more sense.
100%.
Yeah, well, extended cuts, the Zack Snyder Justice League. And again, not to be such a Zack Snyder pusher, but when I had seen Justice League, I'd seen the theatrical cut, and I was, okay, the team comes together, has its moments. Aquaman sitting on Wonder Woman's lasso of truth. That's funny. But I couldn't tell you what the movie was about, and I couldn't make it cohesive. And I got that 4.5 hour black and white Justice is Gray thing, and I sat down and I watched. I'm like, it was a long movie, but you know what? There was a story.
Well, there were three. Here's the stupid part about it. There were 3 movies in that movie. There were 3 movies in that movie. And that would have been $3 billion. That's all I keep thinking about. $3 billion of movies. $1 billion per movie, without a doubt. If done correctly, that would have been $1 billion marketing machine, each one of those movies. So that was just one of many missed opportunities. And I'm so sorry, guys. I actually have to get bouncing. I'm literally starting to get some interesting emoji text from my wife.
Let's wrap it up. Guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Appreciate it.
Emojis. Because I said to her, I'm going to do this from the store tonight because I want to put the rock and roll back in comics. But now the wife is like, home, please. Food, please.
Hungry now. It's an hour later where you are, so let's get you out of there. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here tonight. We don't have a show without you. We're just a podcast falling in the woods otherwise. And of course, every time while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night.